And we're off to the races. Welcome, everyone, back to the Bible Recap Podcast. It's Tyler, Don, and I'm Josh. Week 39, and we are finishing the Old Testament today. We will confess, mind you, that I don't think anyone liked the questions from this week. So we're going to have a fun discussion, that is for sure. Yeah. Good books of the Bible. I mean, like I said last week, Malachi is my favorite, but the questions were
understanding.
Yeah. So those of you following along, again, if you hadn't had a chance to read these, hit pause. I'm going to list them off, and of course, it's in the description box. We finished the book of Esther and Ezra. So Esther 6 through 10, Ezra 7 through 10. We read all of Nehemiah. That's 1 to 13. Malachi, chapters 1 to 4. That's all of Malachi. And, of course, included was Psalm 126, the final psalm.
Yeah.
And so, Tyler will kick us off this week.
Yeah. I will take the first paragraph. Scripture desires Ezra as being skilled in the law of Moses. Chapter 7, verse 6. His knowledge of the word gives him an increased understanding of God's sovereignty. In fact, he credits God with a wide variety of things. The kindness of a pagan king of Persia. Chapter 7, verse 27. The provision of staff. Chapter 8, 18. Protection on their journey. Chapter 8, verse 31. And the favor in the midst of their slavery. Chapter 9, verse 8. How have you seen your view of God increase as you've studied the Word? I kind of just went with, I see God as a faithful father to his people, and he wants a relationship with them. I think that's pretty much, I think I mentioned that on Sunday. Mm-hmm. The whole Old Testament, in my opinion, is just showing how faithful he is to us and how he wants to be a part of our life. Mm-hmm. So,
Yep, continuity. I kind of it became more vivid for me through every book in the Old Testament that I've read. Just like he was there then, he continues to be in the next book, the next prophet. I mean, he just was always there. So it was a continuous time of protection, forgiveness.
Yep.
I don't know why, but he did. He just continued.
Yeah.
So I guess that's just how I see it, is just he continues, and so that is where my awareness and my increased visibility of him. It's just through every book.
Yeah. I think for me, the thing that kept standing out this time around reading through, as we're finishing the Old Testament, was in life, appearances can be deceiving. Even though things may look bad, God is at work. Mm-hmm. Things are good, God is at work. Even when it looks like bad people are have all the good stuff, God is still at work. And so that was the thing that just kind of stood out to me this time around. You always pick up something, but of course, fundamentally, it's seeing the love of God, and that's where I do like the questions she does ask. Seeing His character, learning about that, because too many people will just look at single lines or single verses, take them out of context, and totally miss what God is doing, and what this tells about humanity too, on how we're kind of jacked up at times, and make really stupid decisions.
Broken record.
Yes.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Okay.
All
right. Number 2. Both Ezra and Nehemiah have confessed the sins of the people, not just their own personal sins. While we're only held accountable for our own sins in the scheme of eternity, Scripture seems to demonstrate a measure of responsibility for how we resolve corporate sins on earth. Read the following verses aloud and discuss how you've seen them applied to Ezra and Nehemiah, specifically corporate sin and responsibility. Exodus 25, Jeremiah 32:18, Lamentations 5:7, and then individual sin and responsibility, Deuteronomy 24:16, and Ezekiel 18:20.
All right, I got Exodus,
I've got working on the Jeremiah.
chapter, or
20,
and then verse 5.
5,
Right?
yeah.
You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, I am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sins of their parents to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me.
Jeremiah 32:18. Who shows loving kindness to thousands, but repays the iniquity of fathers into the bosom of their children after them? O great and mighty God, the Lord of hosts is his name.
You have Lamentations,
Yep,
too.
I'm almost there. Looks like I put 2 pages together here.
Which one are you getting done?
I'll get Deuteronomy if you
Okay.
want to get Ezekiel.
Okay.
All right.
Rip
Yep. Well, I
I
put
heard that.
those tabs.
little tabs on there, and I must have put 2 pages together. All right, 5:7. Our ancestors sinned and are no more, and we bear their punishment.
Before we do Deuteronomy and Ezekiel, do we want to talk about corporate sin and responsibility, since those were the 3 verses that or that she chose
I
for
think so.
that?
We can.
Because help me here.
Yeah.
I'm relying on you.
You got it. You got it.
I don't. I don't. So, I mean, I know what they're trying to say as far as, I mean, it's all of us together, but yeah.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts here?
Well, what we see in Scripture is that she talks about individual and community sins, and so we've seen parts in Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, where the nation would receive the consequences of God's judgment because of what the leader's done, and of course that impacts and infiltrates everyone else and leads other people to sin. Mm-hmm. So there can be God has demonstrated the consequences of that. And so what we see in like the confession part on behalf of the people, and I think I've mentioned this before, that the prophets, at times will confess for everybody. Not necessarily they are the ones who have to apologize.
They claim sin, right.
But the prophets also got to understand are also, end up being the spiritual leaders, are trying to point the people back into the right direction. And so calling upon God to bring the people back or bring healing to the land, whatever that might be. And so
specifically then in Exodus, Jeremiah, and Lamentations, what are you seeing?
I need to go back to Jeremiah because that was weird. I think it was weirdly worded in my NASB. 32:18. And this is where, too, I think reading, 1 or 2 verses can sometimes be challenging. Mm-hmm. So in this 32:18, it's a verse out of where Jeremiah is praying to God. So I'm going to back up a verse at 17. Ah, Lord, behold, you have made the heavens and the earth by your great power and your outstretched arm. Nothing is too difficult for you, who shows loving kindness to thousands, but repays the iniquity of fathers into the bosom of their children after them. O great and mighty Lord, the Lord of hosts is his name. Great in counsel, mighty indeed, whose eyes are open to all the ways of the sons of men, giving to everyone according to his ways and according to the fruit of his deeds.
So basically he is just praying on behalf of, praising and praying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Basically on behalf for everyone, and recognizing that when Israel and the people sin, I need to back up one more step. So there are natural consequences and, of course, eternal consequences. I think what we see in part is the confession for the nation, for the people who are alive, and so when it comes upon the consequences of the father sin onto the kids, well, there's the natural consequences of sin and the judgment that the exile is where we're at in the timeline. Because Israel had sinned, God says, if you keep doing this, you're going to get out of the land. Well, what about the people in Isaiah's time, even further back who sinned? They got to stay in the land, but because of the constant sin, which got passed on from generation to generation,
Okay.
it got to the point where, okay, now there's the consequences. Now, of course, with the prayers on the behalf of the people, it's a form of leadership, of confession, repentance, because to change a nation, to change a group of people, it has to start with somebody. And it may not be the person with the title. It may not be the king. It may not be, for us, the president. It could be a church, a pastor, a layperson. A layperson could actually have more leadership in a church than a pastor could. And so there has to be a starting point somewhere, especially on the behalf of the people. One of my favorite leadership quotes is, leadership is leading people where they need to go, yet resist going. And so I see that quite a bit in Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, that, it's like, we got to go back to God. And so, of course, when the people resisted, well, that's natural consequences. All of a sudden, they're like, well, we're out of the land, and it does say that God's going to bring us back. What do we got to do? Well, let's begin with confession, and then, of course, that's where the prophet starts. So,
Okay.
I hope that wasn't too much of a word salad.
No.
I don't think so.
Okay, so then on individual sin and responsibility, I've got Deuteronomy 24:16.
No. One more thought while you're flipping pages, is that too, when there is corporate sin, it's also good for representation, or for the congregation, so to speak, or the people to get together and confess their sins. Of course, we've seen that too in the Old Testament. And so that's where I think important for reflection for Christians and for a church, if they went through a season where, we messed up pretty bad in how they've handled something or how they treat a group of people, whatever, to confess it, but also look to where God is then wanting them to move in a growing direction. Because today in our culture, we tend to, when people make mistakes or do something dumb or maybe went down a wrong path, we tend to grind them into dust as much as possible without realizing that in their repentance, apologizing, there's also forgiveness. And repentance is not just moving away from something, it's also moving to something. But we tend to not want to give people that opportunity, because we rather sit in our anger and grind people than show that there is love, hope, grace, mercy, transformation on the other side.
Yeah. Which is what God has continued to do. But yeah. Okay, so 24:16. Fathers shall not be put to death because of their children, nor shall children be put to death because of their fathers. Each one shall be put to death for his own sin.
Then do you have it, Jess?
If you have it, you go for it.
I got it. All right. 20, right?
Yes.
The one who
Ezekiel.
sins is the one who will die. The child will not share the guilt of the parent, nor will the parent share the guilt of the child. The righteousness of the righteous will be credited to them, and the wickedness of the wicked will be charged against them. I just think with that, it's God being fair and just. I shouldn't have to, Dawn shouldn't be punished for my sins as I shouldn't be punished for her sins, and vice versa, and everything else. My goodness, and Dawn does a lot more good than I do, but but I think
Rebuttal that.
and I think that's just God's fairness right there. It shows His love. It's just like like a parent. You don't punish all of them. Well, sometimes you do. If it's bad enough and there's several of them involved, you have to punish them all, take something away they all want, but usually you don't punish all for the bad of one. So
Good enough for me.
So, like with the group, if a nation or group of people mess up, of course, sin spreads, impacts. There's consequences to the whole, even though there might be, in a sense, innocent people who have not done wrong within that group.
Are still being punished.
But with individual sins, and so in a sense, we could say God's not going to condemn, using the Bible example, He's not going to condemn the child because of the sins of the father. Roy's not going to go to jail because Tyler embezzled money. He didn't really.
Let's hope no one. Don't need to be looking in on me.
That was maybe not a good example.
Well, so that was the first example I thought of. Like, well, that's.
Yeah.
So God's fair. God's just.
So sorry, I didn't mean to.
Go for it.
So corporate sin would be more of, if I sin, that would cause more people to sin. Would that be correct? Where if I just sin individually, and it may hurt someone, but it's not causing that snowball effect. Is that kind of more?
So, say you're the pastor, leadership team member, whatever it would be, and you convince the rest of the leadership to do something that is immoral and ethical, and they buy in. And so it's not just you now, it's a group participation, because in essence, as Christians, we should know better if it's something immoral, unethical. And so that's where it becomes a corporate problem.
Okay.
If you are, doing something, and then the LT pastor, holds you accountable to that, that only that impacts you.
Okay. So everyone would have to be at fault more of for corporate. Okay.
Yeah, or if the leadership team adopted something that was unethical, immoral, racist, sexist, whatever, that's on the whole. And so even if the leadership team of 9 people, bringing down the example from National Israel, God could withhold the blessing that He was planning for the whole church, because again, that leadership represents everybody, and so it. There's that corporate involvement in that.
Okay.
And so you think about it, I think about historically, because racism is a popular thing. So I think about a lot of the racist behaviors of Methodists in the 1800s. That's a corporate thing. But if, say, on the Methodist Episcopal Church that was in the North, where one person was racist, that's his problem with God, not the churches.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to get you off on what
Oh,
you were
you're
saying, but I felt like that was needed to be said. So
Yeah. All right, number 3. How would you describe the prayer in Nehemiah chapter 9, verses 6 to 38? The only request it makes of God is for Him to take notice of their current state of affliction. Verse 32. How is this kind of prayer fitting for a corporate setting? Why would a different kind of prayer be more suited to a private setting?
I just felt like he was speaking for the whole but the whole part of Israel. He was speaking for all the Israelites, speaking for all of God's people, and that it wasn't just, save these few people. It wasn't save me. It was save all of us. So it kind of matched to me, or let me not save me. I was looking at the wrong part.
You're good.
Kind of apologizing for all of Israel. And then I felt like he was also asking for forgiveness from God for everyone for that. We talk a lot about cultural norms, and I feel like that was he was apologizing for cultural norms at the time.
Oh, yeah.
So, but I would, it's in a private setting, you could still do that prayer, but it wouldn't be as impactful. And that's why I think something else would have been needed in a private setting.
I got nothing.
So the thoughts I have on this, I'm debating went out to 2 or 3 different points.
Yeah. We'll take
I think-
number 2, please.
I think the first major thing is, I think kind of what you already highlighted already is that he's praying on the behalf of the people. And of course, Nehemiah is not alone in this prayer either. It's because he's at this point. He's got people involved, invested, and of course, this takes place over a number of years, and so this could be something that not only was said once, it probably could have been recorded and shared repeatedly. But I think the thing I want to really highlight is that how's this prayer fitting for a corporate setting is that I don't think Nehemiah wants to presume what the next step is. They're all returned from exile, so I think he's got an idea, but also in the midst of them returning, there's been this difficulty. There's been these guys who are just creating problems for him, especially him personally. And so I think he's showing a humility that he doesn't want to presume. And so in essence, I think he's asking God for help. And I think then the second thing I was thinking about, to her other question, why would it be a different kind of prayer for more private setting?
Yeah.
Is that in a corporate setting, you can't speak to every little situation, especially if it impacts a nation. You don't know what God has planned economically, politically, militarily, whatever. And so in a private setting, you can get down deep and share your heart with God. So God, this is what I would like, but, going to, Jesus in John 17, not your will, but mine. And then so, God, show me what you want. And so I think for Nehemiah to say, please take notice of the situation, which he knows God already knows what's going on. I think he's in that point where God, I'm struggling with these guys and we're having a hard time, continuing and completing the work. I think it's just probably a 5th century BC way of saying, God, help us out here. That's kind of where I went. Any thoughts after that?
The only thing I was thinking is that sometimes I think it has to be in a private setting to combine us all into that corporate setting. I think you have to be in that right frame of mind to even be able to pray for, to help understand the whole corporate setting, if that makes sense. Yeah. Just like if you did have, if I saw something that I felt like as a church we were doing wrong, I have to be in my right frame of mind in the private setting of prayer and asking for guidance before I indulge in we're all in this together. I don't know. Maybe it just made me think of that how the two could be different.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So almost like you need to reflect privately on what you're...
Right, to
what
ask
you're,
for that.
Yeah.
Okay,
How-
I know. I feel like I'm sinning here, but I also feel like we're all sinning, so I've got to get right first before I can.
You got to fix yourself before you can fix others.
Yeah.
Well, and I thought about prayers for, so like on Sunday morning, I kind of, I offer the general area, but I allow, the space for people to fill in the specifics. But I also think about for those who may have lost a loved one, talk about prayers. And so I'll mention, mourning, but also hope, because depending on the situation, it might have been a relief because of maybe they were just so sick, in a lot of pain. And so there's a mix of mourning, but also relief out of their love for their loved one for that passed away. And so I think in the same sense, a general prayer, asking God just to be present, just to move, allows that space to where people are individually to encounter God and to be stirred in their own individual direction that also then, kind of still works itself out and operates connectively, connectional.
Mm-hmm.
Add your adverb. Yeah, these questions are just.
They were tough
Yeah.
this week.
I think it's wording for me. Like some of it is, it's almost
Yeah.
too wordy, and
I struggle with what are you really asking, because it's just.
I always have to go to the end, read the actual question first, and then reread the whole thing.
Yeah.
So
And if you're just following along, I mean, yeah, if you can zoom in on that. I mean, that's the questions are literally paragraphs long.
Yeah.
yeah. So, all right, are we ready for number 4?
Yeah.
In the Hebrew Old Testament, Ezra and Nicodemus, right? Nehemiah, sorry.
You're good.
Nehemiah are one book of history, not two. Their timelines and locations often overlap with similarities. What similarities and contrasts do you see between the two leaders? Which leaders are you drawn to the most, and why? Well, I have Ezra as a high priest or priest, and then N is what I've been putting here because I couldn't remember how to say it, but is more of like a political leader. He's not a priest, but I had them both as God-fearing, but other than that, I feel like they're almost opposites, where Ezra is very that word I'm thinking of is sensitive, but that's not the word. Like, I completely lost it, but where Nehemiah is very like confrontational, like.
And I think he liked to take I think he liked to take the credit.
Yeah.
Ezra didn't. I mean, he pushed towards that, but he was okay with if it was his idea, but somebody else got the credit for it, basically. I mean, I think he was
okay in the shadows almost, yeah.
Yes. But Nehemiah definitely wanted to be the leader.
Yeah, loud, boisterous,
Yes.
where Ezra seemed to be a little bit more quiet and,
he was very confident. Nehemiah was very confident.
That was the word I was looking for him, but.
I would apply confident to both.
Yeah.
You remember in Ezra, I was like, you found out, that they were marrying the wrong women, and it was like,
Yeah. Well, and that's that. Their similarities were both of them opposed intermarriage, and then also shared that desire to rebuild the temple, and they both wanted to get to the same place. They just did it in different manners.
Yeah.
Yeah, they each had their different area. I mean, Ezra focused on the temple, Nehemiah on the city. And of course, Nehemiah was governor, and so I mean, he had a whole lot more to worry about than just one building, so to speak. And so that's where I think for Nehemiah, he had to be a person of great confidence, and to be able to brush off, his
almost
detractors.
I almost felt like he had to be that way, otherwise he would have lost his position. And then, though as well, like you have to I felt like in that time, and even today, you have to show yourself a strength as a political leader, as a governor, to be able to first stay in office and let alone get anything done too. So, but I did see some narcissism almost, where he was kind of.
Yeah. So which one were you drawn to more?
I can't really say one or the other. I'm always more towards a stronger voice. Like I said, I don't want to say confidence, but I like someone that's goes straight to action, and where I felt like Ezra was more kind of go with the flow a little bit. But at the same time, I think Nehemiah was almost too confident, to where I think I would sometimes would have not wanted to follow him, knowing how I am. So I'm going to say both. Like I'm like 50-50. Like I think they both had good qualities. They said some qualities I want to see as a leader, but I'm going to be Switzerland on this one.
I'm sure I'm drawn more to Nehemiah, just because that's in my nature.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit loud and more boisterous, but I wish I was more like Ezra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wish I was I see a Dawn and I see a Luella. I wish I was more a Luella.
Oh, man. Yeah.
There you go.
I'm drawn more to Nehemiah, because part of it, I mean, he was the underdog. I mean, he was,
Yep.
as much as he had the king's backing, that did not deter, and so he was willing to throw down for his people. I think he and I are probably best friends, just because a lot of the people I've been like close to friend wise, they have very much that character trait of confidence,
Yeah.
verging on arrogance.
Yeah.
And I think part of that, is that conviction, commitment, confidence in God, in yourself once you're gifted to. I mean, I've been accused of arrogance at times, and
Surely not.
yes, I'm slightly arrogant by being called arrogant. So I think I'd be drawn to Nehemiah, and just because he had just a task ahead of him. But one thing to note, when they had that service where Ezra read the scripture, and from early day to noon or whatever that was, I think I calculated that once. I think it was like 6 hours. Can you imagine having church for 6 hours? That'd be awesome. But still.
I was just trying to think what time we'd get out of here.
Yeah.
So like 4:00.
Yep.
My grandpa, that's what he went to a non-denominational church, and that's his was all 4 hours, but there was like they would almost like break out in groups and like had individual Bible studies and then come back, and so it was interesting, but it was a lot when you're not used to it.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
So
Yeah, if God moves in revival, sometimes it'll last 4 days, sometimes it'll last a couple weeks.
yeah.
And I'm moving on to 5. Malachi points out strong contrast between Jacob and Esau. If you had a chance to research this, why do you think he was pointing to? Here are some popular options. A, God hated Esau the person. B, by comparison, God loved Esau less than Jacob. C, this refers to the two people groups, not necessarily individual people. D, this text reveals that God isn't bound by this cultural norms to show preference to the firstborn. What is the hardest about this passage for you, and why?
Okay. I have some feelings about this.
Feel away.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. There was a point where, when I read in there, it stated, maybe it wasn't this, it was maybe where it stated that God hated it. Now, I was saying it all day just fine, but now I can't say
Esau?
it. Esau, yeah. I was just always taught that God doesn't hate anyone. So that's where I have which I'm sure it comes down to translation and, probably words we don't have, but that's just where I don't feel like God has hate in his heart, because if he loves everyone, how can you hate them at the same time? I don't know. That's where I have issues with, but I think that's where it just comes into wording and probably just what I've learned as a child. So that's what when they say God loves everyone. But my second thing, and I got asked this question, I know I've asked this probably like 6 months ago. Esau is where they go down to say where Islam and Muslim started, correct?
No.
Okay. Who?
Esau, so remember Jacob and Esau, Jacob flees. So the descendants of Islam are from
Abraham
Ishmael.
Ishmael. Okay, that's where I knew there was
Yeah. So
E
Esau's
somewhere
descendants are like, the Edomites.
Yeah, okay.
The Edomites. And because that was one of the big things about Herod when he was king over Israel, when Jesus was born, is that even though he gave money in support to the temple and to Jewish worship, he was an Edomite. He was a descendant of Esau. And so, when you're a Jewish person, you see someone who's not supposed to be in power,
Yeah.
in power. So, yeah. So,
Okay. Well, my second question's gone.
okay.
But I put C and D kind of in between that at the time because I was thinking Esau was start of the, but honestly, it would be the same thing really still. So, but I also think because wasn't Esau's issue was because he picked Jacob and Jacob wasn't the firstborn, so he was kind of butthurt about that because he was firstborn. He should be. Okay, I'm following now.
Yeah.
So I almost think it's C and D to a point for me. It's, and then I kind of answered what was the hardest part about when he was talking about hate. So that's my answers. I'm sticking to them.
I went with two people. I felt like I was drawn more to, this refers to the two people groups, not necessarily the individual people. And I think he was just kind of showing us the different characters, I guess. What was the hardest part for me? I think it just has to continue to be frustrating, because I think you feel when you have to designate that there's two groups, that to me has to be frustrating, and he continues to feel rejected by his own people. Yeah. But I think that's why he put them in separated them. Not that he's loving one less than the other, but that's why. That's how I see it in my own mind. It's just because I think there's times that we're frustrated and we don't necessarily put that person in that all by themselves. Even though, I mean, you can do it with your kids. You're going to see something in one kid that you don't see in the other, and you might like more in this one, but that doesn't mean this one over here doesn't have some strong points as well. So, again, that's got to be frustrating for God, but doesn't love us any less.
So we're trying to reconcile a few things. So God is love. He loves all people because not only is he going to gather Israel at a certain point in time, as he's already prophesied, he's going to gather all the nations. So, however, we do know that Israel has a special status, referred to in the Exodus as the firstborn, and so there is a certain elevation of Israel in particular. So there's love of all, but there's a certain elevation. And so that's where I think the context of the letter, especially his first few verses, and God's, I have loved you, which I don't like the verb tense to use. It's, I love you. And then the response from the people, how have you loved us? Which, right now it seems ridiculous, but this is a dialogue for, that God's using to show them, his heart, his love for them, and how they are failing to love him back, even though they're accusing him. So basically Israel's projecting onto God. And so when God says, I hated Esau, and I have made his mountains a desolation and appointed his inheritance to the jackals of the wilderness, basically God is using hyperbole to point out how special Israel is. Because again, if your spouse were to say, do you really love me? I love you. How have you loved me? Well, our natural response would actually be pretty hyperbolic and grand. So I do this and this and this, and and just kind of this over the top type of thing here. So I think in the same sense, that's what God is doing here through Malachi, saying, if they're saying, well, God, how have you loved us? I chose you. According to the cultural process, Esau was supposed to get everything that you received, but I chose you. And so, using hyperbolic language, I love you, I hated him. Now, does God literally hate Esau or his people? No. But it's that hyperbolic emphasis for God, underlining, drawing hearts on the eyes and all that stuff. I love you. But you say, how have you loved us? I chose you. Of all the people, of those who are the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Isaac, I chose you. Of what the cultural process should have been, I chose you. And of course, in other places, of all the peoples of the earth, I chose you. So I would fall into D.
Yeah. I took that.
Because really, for what I see in Malachi, it's kind of a love letter where God's affirming his love, his commitment to his people. And of course, with the back and forth, the people are throwing up excuses. And you're near the end. Why would you rob me? Well, how have we robbed you? You're not giving. You're supposed to be just. You're supposed to be giving to the temple, because we know in Ezra and Nehemiah that the people were withholding giving to the temple because that also helps take care of the Levites and the priests. Yeah. So what I see in the letter is that God is saying, I have poured my heart into you, and you are not giving me anything of your heart. Because like with the sacrifices, would you take what you offer to me? Would you take that to the governor? No. You'd be arrested or worse. And why would you think that's okay to give to me? The God of the universe who chose you.
Yeesh.
All right, I need to get my chew toy out here in a minute. That's a lot to
Yeah,
chew on.
and that's where it's like,
I'm glazed over.
like God, it's like he wants their worship, their commitment, their life to be genuine. He doesn't want fake. He wants their heart. He wants them to love him genuinely. And that's where he says, it's like second chapter, where he says, you might as well lock the doors. Don't go through the motions. If I'm not going to have you, lock the doors. That'd be a hard sermon to hear, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Show up at church, doors bolted, chained. Pastor, what's going on? Sick of y'all going through the motions.
Wowzers.
God wants your
Just
heart.
slap in the face, but
Yeah.
it might be one that's
Needed some
needed.
days.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where I think today I don't think we are ready to accept or are ready to just experience all the blessings, because we're not ready to be called to the carpet.
No. We like to think we are,
Oh yeah.
but
Yeah. And to fully embrace the power of the gospel. Oh my goodness, the
Yeah.
things that could happen. Not just the prophecy part here of locking doors or whatnot, but just what God is capable and promises. And hear about miracles of, in third world countries. It's like, what are we missing out on? What are we doing or not doing where God's like, you're not there yet, and I want to do so much more. Something to think about. Tyler's
Yeah.
wheels are spinning.
My hamster's getting worn out.
I think you're 6.
Oh, yeah.
I think.
Yep.
Yes, true story. If God were to love one, this is the question I didn't like at all.
A 6, 7, and 8.
Yeah.
Might as well just throw them all together because
Well,
I'm lost.
She sets it up from 5, and that's for. Anyways,
Yeah.
I'll read the question, and we'll continue to gripe about it for those of you watching online. If God were to love one sinner but hate another, which person would get what they deserve from God? Which person would get what they didn't deserve. I mean, that's an obvious answer.
Mm-hmm.
What does this help us as we wrestle with the Jacob Esau question above? I don't think the question applies to what God is doing.
Yeah, I just put they both received what they deserved. If we're talking about Jacob and Esau, like, I felt like, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I usually am, but Esau wasn't following what he was supposed to be doing. He wasn't following the word.
Well, if we remember, when Jacob comes back and they had that reconciliation moment, Esau's like, I'm good. I didn't need all the gifts. I'm doing good on my own.
Yeah.
Now, of course, down the line of history, his descendants, they goof up, and of course then God calls them to the carpet, and it's like,
Yeah.
well, because you are a jerk, you're going to experience consequences too. And so that's where I think the question totally is I don't think applies to what the intent is, what God was saying through the prophet, and how we then connect and weave the history part from Genesis.
Yeah.
So
All right, number 7. The end of the book of Malachi describes 2 fires, the oven to burn up the evildoers, and the sun of righteousness that brings healing. How might this idea of fire serving 2 opposite purposes for the 2 different types of people connect with Jacob and Esau? Question at the beginning of the book.
see that I don't think
number
that's
6.
Appropriate connection either.
I mean, my whole number 6 on down was oh my. I'm just like, I'm not following what.
Well, I've got some thoughts about the first part, just totally removing the Jacob and Esau stuff, because I think that's totally inappropriate. It's not not a correct connection. The idea of fires. Well, God, has used the image of fire before, where a refining fire or consequential fire, and of course, we have fire imagery where God says, everything is going to be put through this refiner's fire, and what doesn't stand the test of the purpose of the fire is going to be burnt away. So, we got to be careful not to take it too literally, because I think in a sense it reveals that God is going to test, and then of course our own saying, trial by fire.
So,
does it mean literal fire? No. We're not walking on coals or stepping through
Right.
flames.
what this really be meaning is heaven and hell.
Say that again.
Could this be really, like, we take that out? Like, I kept thinking of heaven and hell.
Mm-hmm. I think that's her intended purpose of the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which, through the refiner's fire, I mean it'll prove what we believe and what we did, because everything's going to be made bare. And so, in a sense, heavenly promotion or southerly promotion, demotion.
Demotion. Whew, okay.
That is correct.
So, yeah. I just didn't like where she went, because I was like, just don't. I've never seen that type of connection.
Yeah.
With any commentaries I've read, unless I just missed it.
And he's a doctor.
Not on Malachi.
All right, number 8.
Oh, me? Sorry.
Donna,
You're
it's
good.
you.
How do these 2 fires disprove the people's 2 accusations of God in 2:17?
All right, 2:17. Read it here. You have wearied the Lord with your words. You say, "How have we wearied him?" And that you say, "Everyone who does evil is good in the sight of the Lord, and He delights in them." Or, where is the God of justice?
I'm just going to say it's common sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think we just discussed it at the end of the last question. It's heaven and hell. So,
yeah. And that's where I think for Israel, as they're being, in a sense, quoted here, is that sometimes we get in a situation where, like, God, where are you? And then we start making false accusations against God. And so God continually, through the Old Testament, of course, it'd be through their history of hundreds of years, thousands of years, that God has had a major concern about justice, but He's also said that they are also participants in it. It's up to them to follow what He wants. He's not going to control them like puppets. But if they don't do justice, they're going to pay the consequences. And of course, I think in the scheme of history, I mean, this is people return from exile, so they're mixed in with people who do not know, they do not believe, and so they're not going to behave in that form or fashion.
And some of that I was thinking of when you were talking about that is like in the book of Esther, where they were talking about when her and Malachi brought back the decree of pretty much the Jews could protect themselves. Mm-hmm. So if someone attacked them, how many people stated they were Jewish at that point, or an Israelite, or was converted, just some. But I think it shows how many of those people would have probably came back to Jerusalem. So it's not just the people, some Gentiles too. So sorry, I thought it made more sense until I started opening my mouth.
You're good. You're good. That's why this is a journey.
It is a journey.
Do you have anything for that
No.
question, lady?
Nope.
So, all right, number 9, the only favorite question of the week because it's the only one that stays the same. What is your God shot? Mine is 268. If I can get there. Despite how messed up the last whole scene is, sin on sin on sin. Sure, how do I say that? Shekhinah has beautiful words that he confesses his sin. Even now, there is hope for Israel in spite of this. Their hope isn't that they are finally going to get things right. Their hope is that God has entered into the covenant with them. God has prepared them despite their sins. God offers forgiveness, and God extends hope. Hope is a person, and He is where the joy is. It's just sometimes we need hope. And with the sick household I got now, I kind of need some hope that we're going to get out of this so I can sleep. That would be really nice. So it was just nice. Sometimes we just need hope. It doesn't, not for any necessarily reason or anything else. I think having a little bit of hope in just life itself is pretty miraculous.
I chose day 271. God makes himself known to people who have long forgotten or ignored who he is. They've never really known what his word said, and they've abandoned one of his feasts for nearly 1,000 years, and still, he says, I'm not giving up on you. God is committed to being known by his people and being in relationship with them. He's so patient and persistent, and their hearts respond with an ache and a shout of joy. After all this time, they're finally seeing him, and hopefully they're realizing he's where the joy is. This one kind of hit me because, I think we feel this a lot. So we recognize him and we feel that joy again, but unfortunately we fall away. But I'm so grateful that he is persistent and he keeps trying to bring us back. And what a beautiful tribute to his kids that he isn't going to give up on us. I mean, thank goodness, because again, we fall away so many times. So I can relate to this, even though I'd like to say I don't relate to this. I do.
It's not a bad thing.
No. Yeah. All right, I had number 270. God grants Nehemiah incredible discernment and strength in the midst of the conspiracy of powerful people around him. They're threatening his livelihood and even his life. They're trying to get the people under his authority to doubt him and rebel against him, and they're relentless in their campaign against him. Even though he keeps taking the higher road, since Nehemiah repeatedly seeks God for strength, direction, and discernment, it's clear that he knows where those things originate, with God, not with him. Since he got his start as an assistant, he's used to taking orders and following authority, which helps him stay humble. When he gets promoted, he doesn't grow arrogant and show it off or pull out any false humility. True humility is confident humility. The confidence comes from looking to God as our source, and the humility comes from seeing ourselves in light of who God is. Confident humility is when you're not building yourself up or beating yourself up. Nehemiah walks in confident humility not because he's awesome, but because he knows the source of his strength lies in the God who calls him and equips him. Nehemiah knows he's where the joy is. The fact for me that he did not take any of the benefits of being governor, and that he spent, I would say since he spent time with the people, he just didn't hang out like the other governors. He didn't behave like them. And that he was willing to even go incognito right at the start when he gets there. It's like, okay, what's this project going to look like? And so, in a sense, I saw him as one, as confident as he is, he's also willing to get his hands dirty with the people.
And I can see why you related to that one. Can you? Yeah, me too. I'm not saying that in a bad way.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see why you related to that. I mean, it did. It drew you in.
Yep, I did. And I've always enjoyed reading Nehemiah. So, all right. Thank you guys for joining us here on week 39. We finished the Old Testament today, and so next week when we return again,
Just a little over a year.
Yeah.
We're a year and 1 week, I feel like, we finished the Old Testament.
oh goodness,
It's not the Bible recap in 1 year. It's the Bible recap in about a quarter.
yeah. Bible recap when we get done.
Yeah. Yeah, someday, right?
Hey, we're in New
According to
Testament.
Josh, Tyler, and Dawn, this is our recap.
Good thing the years aren't based on us finishing this.
All right. Anyways, next week we're going to get into the Gospels, and so that I'm going to try to look through and because she's got the chapters scattered. So next week, Matthew chapters 1 through 4, and then 8. So Matthew 1 through 4 and 8. Mark chapters 1 and 2. Luke chapters 1 through 5. And then John chapters 1 through 4. So again, that will be in the description box. And so we're covering, of course, the Christmas story and the early parts of Jesus's ministry. So it'll be a really good time, and I'm looking forward to some, better questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right, guys, thank you for joining us again. Take care. God bless. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Have a good week.
Bye.